Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Good Boxing Podcast with your host, Josh Sias. And I'm going to jump right into this episode. At long last, we have the return of an old king at 147 pounds in Keith One Time Thurman at one of the most deep and profound divisions in a very long time. 147 pounds is stacked, to say the least. You have the likes of Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence, Jaron Ennis Boots, and the list goes on, formerly Sean Porter, etc., etc. Now, clearly, everybody wants to see the marquee matchup between Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence. However, when you look back at some of the best names at 147 pounds, some of the names you think of are Sean Porter, who is retired now, Keith Thurman, who, after losing to Manny Pacquiao, God knows what happened to him. He's been out of the ring since. You have Danny Garcia, who is wishy-washy right now. We don't know what he's going to do. But then you also have Yordenis Ugas, who recently beat Manny Pacquiao and made Manny Pacquiao retire. However, now with the releasing of Terrence Crawford from Top Rank and the schism between Top Rank and PBC seemingly to be over, with Bob Arum getting very up there in age and PBC having the predominant number of fighters at 147 pounds, I just see this division getting deeper and deeper. And the reason why I feel Keith One Time Thurman being back is such a pivotal role is, and if you don't know, Keith Thurman is returning to fight the guy that fought Gervonta Tank Davis, MArio Barrios, at 147 pounds. Now, if you look at the rankings, and I'll do that for you, Keith One Time Thurman, even though he has been gone for a while, is still ranked pretty high. He was on hiatus, apparently had a shoulder injury. There was a bunch of different things that were going on, mental health. He seemed to gain a bunch of weight. I don't know if you saw him, but at one point, I think he was even 200 pounds, which for Keith Thurman, if you always looked at him, he was always in good shape. But well, he's actually not ranked because he hasn't fought for a while. So I take that back. Yeah, he's pretty much fallen out of the rankings. He dropped out of the top 10 for Box Rec and Box Live this month. So he's no longer in the top 15 of the welterweight division. Well, if he gets back, fights, beats Barrios, I think he immediately catapults himself back into the argument, because his last fight he lost to Manny Pacquiao, which, if you really think about it, Pacquiao was the super champion, or actually he was the super champion, and then he lost to a future Hall of Famer and a legend. Losing to Manny Pacquiao, even though he was favored to beat Pacquiao, isn't that much of a knock on your record. He felt embarrassed or whatever he felt. But if you really think about it, it shouldn't drop you out of the top 10 rankings. I get why you got dropped out, because you were inactive. So just like Pacquiao to give up his super championship to Ugas, Manny Pacquiao and Keith Thurman needed to get dropped out of the rankings for inactivity. But now, here's the exciting part about Keith Thurman. When you think about a fight and you think about the names that would make the biggest fight from a financial perspective, adding Keith Thurman into the mix makes Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence that much more exciting. One, for as good as Yordenis Ugas is, and I'm a fan, I think he's a tremendous boxer. He knows how to fight southpaws very well. And actually, I think from a tactical and technical standpoint, Ugas would present a very difficult matchup for Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford because of his proficiency fighting southpaws. He knows how to take angles. He knows how to deal with switching. And he comes from the Cuban amateur system, where you've seen every style. And with Ugas, he can box, he can bang, and physically, he cannot get dominated by Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. You can arguably say that Ugas is stronger than both of those guys. You're talking about a guy that bullied Sean Porter before Sean Porter lost to Terrence Crawford and got knocked out. You're talking about a guy that bullied Manny Pacquiao, was able to stand right in front of Pacquiao and not back down. And that alone is a tremendous feat. However, in terms of name notoriety, I don't think Ugas would sell as well as a Keith Thurman versus Terrence Crawford, especially if Keith Thurman gets back to being relevant, sets a statement and says, hey, I needed some time off. I haven't taken off since I was an amateur or since he hurt his hand, rather. I think it's much better to have Keith Thurman fight like a Ugas, get that belt, and then set up a Terrence Crawford versus Keith Thurman. Winner of that has 2 belts, and then those 2 belts unify, and you go and fight go fight Errol Spence for the remaining 2. Now you have a super fight. Now you have an undisputed welterweight championship of the world fight where you have 2 big names going into a pay-per-view, which would be box office. Because I'll be honest with you right now, it's going to be hard to sell Keith Thurman going into a fight with Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford off a 2-year plus layoff and pick Keith Thurman to win. However, you get Keith Thurman to win a few times, get him back in there, see him knock out a couple of guys that were gimmies like Barrios. I'm a little critical of it. I didn't want to see Tank Davis fight Barrios because I thought it was an overwhelming matchup. But if Keith Thurman can't beat Mario Barrios, then he doesn't deserve to fight for a title. And that's just being honest. He deserves a gimme fight. He deserves a fight where he can knock the ring rust off because he took a tremendous chance in fighting Manny Pacquiao. Say what you want. I know he was favored, but you fight a legend, you fight a whirlwind that is Manny Pacquiao. You do not know how you will come out. You may not come out the same fighter, and we don't know if Keith one time is the same. So give him the Barrios fight. Then you have Ugas versus Thurman. That's a tremendous fight. Then you have Crawford versus Thurman potentially. Mega fight. Even Thurman versus Spence, who is another guy that needs a comeback fight. Maybe he fights Keith one-time Thurman, and you have 2 guys who are coming off of long layoffs fighting each other for a unified title. If Thurman can fight for a title, maybe he shocks Spence. Who knows? But yeah, 147 has just gotten so interesting. And welcome back, Keith Thurman. That's all I can say. Let me know what you guys think. Do you want to see Keith Thurman fight the top of the top? Do you agree with me? Do you think Keith Thurman's a bigger name than Ugas? I think so. But yeah, 147, Keith Thurman versus Crawford. Spence versus Keith Thurman. Huge fight. Even Ugas versus Thurman. Big fights. And winner, let's say Ugas wins, he fights Terrence Crawford. Beats Crawford, he could fight Spence. If he beats Spence, he could fight Crawford. 147 is just tremendous.